Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Arnetta Legree, your host, and this broadcast is The Bible is Good for Your Mental Health. Again, this is called The Bible is Good for Your Mental Health. Some of you may know who I am. You see me on other broadcasts. We have the mental health broadcast as well. But I want to specifically come on this channel and talk about mental health in the Bible. Research tells us that both religion and spirituality are good for your mental health, right? But that there are certain types of religion, certain types of views where that's not the case. So I just want to kind of talk a little bit about that. When we talk about mental illnesses is defined, I'm going to define it first, as diagnosable mental disorders or health conditions that are characterized by alterations in thinking, mood, or behavior. So again, we're talking about a change in a person's thinking, their mood, or behavior. Then you also have what's called mental health. And mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So when we talk about mental illnesses, we're talking about diagnosable diseases or illnesses, and there are different types. You may have some diseases or mental illnesses that are more considered to be more severe than others. When we talk about severe and persistent mental illnesses, we are talking about those illnesses that are so severe that they impact all aspects of an individual life. Research tells us, and you can actually go onto our website. We have some sources here for you. Our website, igbattmho.org, where we look at how both religion and spirituality are good for your mental health. So just let me read a couple of things here, and then I'll talk it over. Religion and spirituality, what is it? Religiousness can be defined as participation in an institutionalized doctrine, a system or set of beliefs and practice, while spirituality is framed as an individual pursuit of meaning outside the world. Religion can also be included as an expression of spirituality. So there's a little difference between religion and spirituality. But we know based on research, for example, a meta-analysis using 34 studies conducted over the last 12 years explored the relationships between religion and everyday psychological functioning, as well as spirituality, and we found that there are some positive correlations, right? So when we talk about spirituality and religiousness, again, religiousness, you can think about it as the act of actually going to church, connecting with people, taking communion, catechism. It's the actual act, right? Where spirituality, which is a part of religion or can be a part of religion, is something that's outside of itself. But we know that both of them, religion and spirituality, for those who adhere to these practices, can provide hope, optimism, structure, that they're good for us, right? So when people like to say, well, the Bible is no good, the problem is not the Bible, it's our interpretation of the Bible. Now, so let me start with there. Let's talk about the Bible itself. When you actually look at the Bible honestly and realistically, and you look at the God who wrote the Bible, who authored the Bible, you're looking at a couple of things that you will have to be, I encourage you to be honest about. Number one, the God of the Bible is not weak. The Bible itself is not what do you call it, a good thinking book, right? The Bible is not positive psychology. It's not good thinking, or if you think good things, thoughts, things will happen. That's not what the Bible is. If anything, the Bible is a book of balance. It takes into account both the good and the bad. It takes into account both the good and the evil. The Bible will encourage you to plan. It will encourage you to set goals. It will encourage you to move forward in life. Right? The Bible is actually the God of the Bible. I like to say he's a God of war, meaning that he's no chump. He's not weak. There's nothing weak about the Bible. What happens is sometimes people use it as a way to become passive. They use it as a way to not set goals or as an excuse to feel like I don't have, God's going to do everything and I don't have to do anything, and that is not the case. The Bible, like I said, is about accountability. It's about encouraging us to move forward. It's about if you don't work, you don't eat. It's about setting goals. So when people like to say, the Bible causes people, to be passive or not really care, or things that people say, that is not the Bible. That's people's perception of the Bible. That is what people perceive. That is what people think. So, but when we talk about the Bible being good for your mental health, let me kind of go into some of these here, because again, we have this on our website. So, when can religion or spirituality be bad for your mental health? Okay, when you feel any religion or spirituality that decreases feelings of self-esteem, that make you feel like there's something wrong with you, that you're no good, that's a religion or spirituality thought that you have to take a look at. Because when you look at the God of the Bible says that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. The God of the Bible lets us know that we can do all things through Christ Jesus who strengthens us. So the God of the Bible will encourages us, right? The God of the Bible will say to us, look, you can have all things, you can do all things through Christ that strengthens you. That's the God of the Bible. So any thought, any idea that makes you think that you can't make it, that you can't succeed, that there is nothing to you, that you're no good, that you're nobody, is not from the God of the Bible. So again, if you have a religious or spiritual thought or spirituality that makes you think, that lowers your self-esteem, because again, your self-esteem should be connected to Jesus Christ. And if you're connected to Jesus Christ, then you can't have self-esteem, low self-esteem, and neither can you be lifted up in pride either, because there'll be a confidence when you know who Jesus is. There'll be a confidence. There'll be a joy. There'll be an understanding to know that all things will work together for good because I love him and I'm called according to his purpose. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to sit back passively and don't do anything. There's a responsibility that I have to do. So when we're talking about religion and spirituality, a positive view, a religious view, a spiritual view, is going to push us to be better. It's going to remind us that because we're fearfully and wonderfully made, that I have a purpose, I should be doing something. I should be seeking the Lord for a plan. So again, any thought, any religious thought or spiritual thought that make us think that we can't make it, or that that lowers our self-esteem, is a problem. Another thing here, any religion or spirituality that prevents you from acknowledging and acting on reality is a problem. Any spiritual thought or religious thought that puts you in a position where you're not acting on reality is a problem. God of the Bible, and I have to make that clear because I know there are a lot of different gods. I just want people to know on this broadcast, I'm talking about Jesus Christ. I'm talking about the God of the Bible. So when we talk about the God of the Bible, and let me read this one again. And what it says here, religion, spirituality that prevents one from acknowledging and acting on reality is not a positive or a thought that's in line with the Word of God. We acknowledge the reality. We acknowledge the fact that, hey, I don't have any money. We acknowledge the fact that this is my diagnosis. We acknowledge the fact that my kid is in prison. We acknowledge whatever it is. We don't walk around and pretend not to know this or pretend like everything's okay. We want to acknowledge it and say, God, this is what's going on. I don't have any money. I don't have a job. I don't have, my kid is in jail. I'm sick. I'm diagnosed with this illness. Whatever it is, you acknowledge it. Because remember, we are told to cast our cares upon him. So when we acknowledge it, we're in a sense of saying, God, help me. I don't know what to do. And as we acknowledge that, and we ask the Lord, give me a plan, give me a strategy. When you ask him for a plan, a strategy, he'll give you a plan. He'll give you a strategy. He'll give us a way out. A door will be open. So again, we don't need to pretend like everything's okay. If I got a diagnosis and the doctor says I have a cold, I don't have to walk around and pretend like I don't have a cold, because that's a lie, because I do have a cold. We can walk in truth. Okay, God, I do have a cold. I don't feel well, but I know with your stripes I'm healed. I know with your stripes things are going to get better, right? So again, we acknowledge the reality, but realizing that because we serve a God, that reality is not permanent. Because we know who our God is, we know, okay, yeah, this is the reality. But because I know who he is, I know that any minute a door will be open, a way will be made, right? So again, I don't have to be depressed about the reality. Neither do I have to walk around and pretend like it doesn't exist. Because when we pretend like something in our life doesn't exist, that is really saying that number one, you don't have faith, right? So you think it's because you're not acknowledging it, that means you have faith. No, faith is saying that yeah, this is what what they say the diagnosis is. This is what's going on right now. But because I have faith and I'm going to trust you that things are going to get better, I can bring it to you. I'm not going to pretend like nothing is going on. And that's a problem. You look at your children, things may not be going right. Things may not be going right with your husband, with your wife. You can acknowledge that. Because remember, he said, bring it to me. Cast your cares upon me. Lord, this is what's going on. This is the problem that I'm having. Okay. I need help. Tell me what to do. And sometimes it may not be anything, but whatever he tells you to do, you want to do that. Okay. But any spirituality or religious beliefs that causes you to acknowledge the reality. So yeah, I do have a diagnosis. I have a diagnosis. I'm diagnosed with schizophrenia. I'm diagnosed with depression. Sometimes I have auditory hallucinations, meaning sometimes I hear voices. Sometimes I get depressed. Sometimes I don't want to get out of bed. Sometimes I don't feel like talking to anyone. I don't have a job. My husband is not doing what he's supposed to do. My wife is cheating on me. You acknowledge those things, and you can acknowledge, well, this is what's going on, and this is how I feel. I feel sad about it. I feel depressed. Why? Because we have a God that we can come to. We have a God who can be touched by the feelings of our infirmity. And not only can he be touched, he will do something about it through people, through us. Okay? So again, when we talk about the Bible is good for your mental health, many times it's my belief that many times why some people think that is because you're not using the Bible accurately. You're not using the Bible as it was designed to be used. The Bible is a book of war. It's a strategy. It's plans in that Bible. It's not just for you to read and and just hope things were going to get better. Yes, we hope, but faith without works is dead. We have to do more than just hope, right? We can't just hope that things are going to get better, right? We want to put some hope. James talks about how faith without works is dead. A lot of times people just hope things will get better, but you're not doing anything. You're not asking God, well, what should I do? And if you're asking and you haven't gotten an answer yet, then you can rest in the fact that He has heard you, and as you can continue to ask, the door will be made. Right? He'll show you what to do, or even He doesn't show you, He'll lead and guide you into all truth. But again, you don't have to be afraid of the diagnosis. You don't have to be afraid of the situation. You don't have to be afraid of the negative things that's going on in your life. Because you're afraid, that's why you're not acknowledging it. It's not about faith, right? Because if you don't acknowledge it, but then you're not sleeping. You don't acknowledge it, but then you're dealing with anxiety. You're dealing with worry, right? I always tell people our feelings have a way of giving us away. Oh, I'm fine, but you're not sleeping. I'm fine, you're not eating, or you're eating too much, right? You're getting into arguments. You get, the least little thing sets you off, right? You get overwhelmed easily. Something happens, you feel like crying, or, something small. Why? Because you're not, you think you trust it, but you really haven't. And those of you, excuse me, I am usually using another camera, so I'm kind of looking to see exactly where I am here. But I want to come on and let you know the Bible is good for your mental health if you use it the right way. Okay. So the next thing that we have here, we want to talk about any religion or spirituality. I talked about that decreases your self-esteem. Any religion or spirituality that prevents you from acknowledging and acting on reality. Third one, any religion or spirituality that places all of the responsibility for change or actions on a belief system. Okay, what do you mean by that? Okay, let me read this again. Religion or spirituality that places all of the responsibility for change or actions on a belief system. Okay, so for example, let's say I'm diagnosed with schizophrenia, okay? And then people will say, well, my religious belief, my spiritual belief is that all you have to do is think yourself happy. My belief is that it's a demon, it's demonic, right? And we do believe that, demons do exist. The Bible talks about them, but that's not what we're talking about today. I'm talking about how the Bible is good for your mental health, how it's good for your symptoms, how it's good for what you're dealing with mentally. right? Yes, we know that from a biblical standpoint, demons do exist. We know from a biblical standpoint they do interfere, they do interact, especially in with people who have doors open, who've allowed to put themselves in situations where demons can can interact. But here's the thing: even if that's you, you have a God who's greater than any demons. Remember, we're talking about the devil, demons. When we get into all of that, we're talking about fallen angels. We're talking about people who are not people. We're talking about entities who were made and created by your Father. So you have no need to fear or worry. Again, casting your cares. But again, when we have this belief that's saying that I shouldn't be sick because I'm a Christian. I shouldn't have this because I fast. I shouldn't be depressed because I should be thinking myself happy. Remember, when we talk about mental illnesses, let me back up a little bit to make sure I'm clear. When we're talking about mental illnesses, we are talking about, I'm sorry, when we're talking about mental illnesses, we're talking about illnesses that are diagnosable illnesses with some type of genetic, biological, or sometimes psychological component. So it's not just that you're feeling down, right? It's not just you're feeling down about a situation. It's like for depression, for example, the difference between depression and sadness. The sadness changes with the situation. So if I don't have any money, of course I'm gonna be a little sad. But depression, even if I hit the lottery for $1 million, with depression I'm still going to be depressed. Why? Because we're talking about chemicals. We're talking about things in the body that are little that need to be adjusted, just like with diabetes or hypertension. Okay, so when we're talking about medical illnesses, we need to deal with medical illnesses with medical strategies, with medical ways of dealing with it. If it's a spiritual issue, we deal with it through a spiritual matter, right? So that's why I say for those of you who may, biblically we know that demons exist. If that's what you're talking about, if it's something spiritual, then you deal with it through a spiritual aspect. But I'm talking about physical illnesses. I'm talking about medical illnesses, right? So how do we deal with that? So you want to be able to put it in the right category. Is this a spiritual or a medical? If it's a medical, then hey, this I know I have to deal with it medically. Again, that doesn't take away from the point, the fact that we're going to cast our cares and still seek God for a plan and a strategy. Okay. Belief that admitting to having an illness or having to take medications makes one less of a believer in his or her faith. Again, any religion or spirituality that makes you feel that because you're getting treatment, because you're taking medications, that you're not a good Christian or you're not a good whatever, a good pastor, whatever. Um, it's that's not a thought from God. That's a thought that's come to condemn you. And God doesn't send, now he may send thoughts to convict us, but not thoughts to condemn us. That's a thought that puts us in a place where we feel like something wrong with us. We feel like we're down, like I'm not enough, that I need to fast more, that I won't be depressed. I won't be, and that's what I'm talking about before. We get into this works thing. I feel if I pray, if I fast, if I read my scriptures enough, then I won't be depressed. And then because I'm doing all these things and then I get depressed, then I feel down about it. So you have to understand that any religious or thought process, spirituality, that make you think that because you have to take medication, because you have to see the doctor, that maybe you're not you're not a good Christian, or it's not of God. Okay. Now let me say this. One of the things that someone who has been in mental health field for a long time, I had seen a lot of changes. I want people to understand that everybody is growing, everybody's changing. There is no one particular group as a whole who, people like to say this particular group, oh, they have a problem talking about mental illness, or this particular group has a problem believing in mental illness. And that's not the case for any group. In every group, you're going to have some people who do, some people who don't. Okay, so that's number one. But also keep in mind that there are some groups, because of the socio-economic factors in that particular group, it's just that mental health, mental illness is not something that gets talked about as much. Why? Because we have to worry about how we're going to, our job. We have to worry about food. We have to go back and forth with our kids to jail. We have to worry about police brutality. We have to worry about being not treated fairly in the legal system. So if you have all of this type of stuff going on, sometimes it's a little hard to focus on mental health at that particular time. I'm so sorry. But that doesn't mean that we're not thinking about mental health. That doesn't mean that we are not concerned about mental health. So, people like to say, it is so true how knowledge pops up. But people like to look at it, for some reason, think that people in the church don't, believe in mental health, and that's not the case. People in the church are not some separate group. They are part of the society, just like you're part of the society. And when you look at the society as a whole, we see stigma in all parts of the society. We see stigma. We see some people education as far as understanding knowledge level, I should say, about mental illness varies. So it's not one particular group that's better than another particular group. We are all learning. Okay. So again, and we're learning different things as research comes out. All right. So where we are now. Religion and spirituality that prevents one from acknowledging and acting on reality. I talked about that. Belief that admitting to having an illness or having to take medications makes one less of a believer in his or her faith. That's not a positive spirituality because you want to admit. Why are you afraid to admit it? Right? Because see, you have to keep in mind that's a part of pride. With pride, you have to be careful that we're not operating in pride because if there's something wrong with us, why don't we want to admit it when there's help out there? Why don't we want to come clean about what's going on with us when we serve a God who will lead and guide us into all truth? Many times we don't want to admit it because we don't want people to know because we're concerned about how people will think about us or how will it be looked, how it will look. Well, I'm a pastor. I can't let people know that I have a mental illness or I'm depressed. I'm a pastor. I can't let people know that my child is diagnosed with schizophrenia. I pray and fast all the time. I can't let people know I hear voices, right? So what happens is we have this thought and we put all this extra pressure on ourselves, which we don't need to be. We don't need to. Because when you're free in Jesus Christ, when you're free the way the Bible would encourage us to be free, then there's no fear. There's no fear in coming to God and saying, hey, this is what's going on with me. Leading God me into all truth. What do I need to do? Because many times, and let me kind of say this, people will say, well, I'm going to read and pray and I'm going to draw nigh to God as a way to deal with my mental health issues. You should do that. But what happens is many times people will say that you are not drawing nigh to God, you're not fasting, you're not praying, you're not doing any of those things. You're just saying that you are. And then when things don't work out, then you get mad. Well, it didn't work. No, because you have a medical condition that needs to be taken care of. It's like when I went to see my doctor, and I'm kind of like borderline hypertension. And I said to the doctor, the first time he told me, I said, no, I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to lose weight because that's all I need to do is lose weight. Okay. So that was the plan. Sounded real good. Lose weight, exercise, knock off maybe like 50 pounds, and I'll be good to go. A medical condition. This was the plan. It sounded like it was great. Well, after about a year or so, I didn't lose any weight. I don't think. Bottom line, went back again. It was kind of the same thing. So it was time for me now to admit, maybe I didn't get on some medication. So, but here's the thing. I started the medications low dose, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I can still work on my weight, that I can still exercise. It's not because I'm taking these medications and, doesn't take away from the fact that there are still some things that I could do to make things better for myself. So just because you admit that you're living with the symptoms of depression, okay? This is my diagnosis. I'm living with depression, okay? I've seen the doctor. I may have to take a low dose of medication. I'm taking the medication. That doesn't take away from the fact that you can still pray, you can still fast, you can still read your word, you can still build yourself up in other areas in your spirituality and in your faith. You can do both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. My goal is that as I help do both, that time goes on, that I can drop the medications. I don't like taking medication, but I do understand that if I'm not faithful to losing weight, if I'm not faithful to eating right, faithful to exercise, then I may be taking the medications for a long period of time. So that was just like a little example there. Where we got here. Belief that expressing a negative emotion equals a lack of spiritual religious commitment. Okay? Again, just because I admit that there's something going on with me, I admit that I'm not doing well, that I'm not feeling well, doesn't mean that I'm not a good Christian. In fact, I'm doing what the Bible tells me to do. Casting my care. I'm coming to Him. We have a God. We can ask Him anything. We can say anything to Him, right? And He will lead and guide us into all truth once we ask. So again, faith in a religious spiritual belief that does not lead to positive action. Our faith should lead to a positive action. The Bible should lead to a positive action. If the Bible leads us to deny our illness, if your reading of the Bible leads you to deny your illness, to deny your symptoms, then you need to take a look at how you're reading it. What lens are you reading it through? Are you reading it through the lens of pride, that you have to have everything right? Because some of you think that. You think you have to be perfect, that you have to have everything right. It has nothing to do with your religion or your faith. That's just who you are, right? We go through life, thinking you had to fight all your life. You had to be, you don't want anybody to know that there's something wrong with you, that you make a mistake. You gotta always look perfect, right? You because you've always had to be on your own, protect yourself, and you had to stand up for yourself. It's hard for you to admit when you're wrong, and it's hard for you to admit when you have a problem. So of course, when you read the Bible, that's how you're going to read it through the lens, that particular lens. So again, as I close, remember the Bible is in fact good for your mental health. It is good for your mental health. It is good for your mental illness, mental health overall. It's important to read and to get a good understanding. Any thought, belief that makes you think that God doesn't love you, that there's something wrong with you, and that there's something wrong with you to the point where you can't get any help, that you're beyond redemption, is a problem. That's a lie. That's a lie, and it's not true. So again, this has been Sister Ayla Grief. I'm from It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach. You can find out more about us by logging onto the website at igbattmho.org. You can email me at support@igbattmho.org. Have a great day, and I will talk to you.